Hello, I'm Taylor Rooks, and in my career as a sports journalist, I've interviewed hundreds of professional athletes. And while each interview is unique, there are specific things you can do to really get the best answers. So this is my method to make any interview interesting. All right, so I have broken this down into 4 parts. First, it's interview prep and research. Secondly, is building a rapport with your guest. Third is interview technique. And fourth, and what I think is most important, follow-ups. Part 1, research and prep. You could argue that researching is the most important part of having a successful interview because you have to go in with some sort of baseline understanding of the athlete, the narratives around them, where they've been, who they believe that they are, and you can only accomplish that through researching.
What happens when you don't have time to prepare?
Ooh, so someone once told me you always have time to prepare. So it's funny that the question is about not having time because it's more so just how much time do you have? If you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes to prepare, really prioritize the things that are the most important. You maybe don't always have an hour or days, but you certainly have enough time to formulate in your head what you want to get out of the interview, the most essential things to ask. And then from that point on, it's really all about listening to what they give you. Next up, building a rapport. I think a big part of it is that I want everyone to feel like we're friends. I think that when someone feels like they're being interviewed, they will give you interview type answers, and that's the #1 thing that you want to avoid. Something I do a lot is if I'm interviewing someone that I don't know well, but I know someone that knows them, I will talk to that person about them before the interview. So when I get there, I can say, oh, I just talked to your friend, blah, blah, blah. I know that person. It just kind of makes that person feel like, oh, like, she's cool, she knows my friend. And that in turn kind of makes them feel a bit more comfortable. So the typical time that you get with an athlete before the interview actually starts, I would say is about 10 to 15 minutes, but all of that time is important. Like you have to utilize that time to make the athlete feel comfortable with you. And one thing I always ask before every interview, and I don't usually tell their secret, but before every interview I say, what is something that you want to talk about that you haven't been able to talk about yet? And I do that in that first 10 to 15 minutes because a lot of the time they give me a really good answer and then I know how I can incorporate that topic into said interview. Next up, interview techniques. I think that I try to ask exactly what I mean. I don't fluff it up because the more that you can fluff up your question, the more they will fluff up their answer. But if you ask them exactly what you mean, they don't really have any other choice but to answer exactly what you said. So in terms of formulating my flow or questions or topics or whatever that I want to hit, I always have it on my phone. And I make sure that before I go into the interview, I set my phone to not lock so that it just stays bright the entire time. And what I have written in my handy dandy notes app, it's not questions, it's topics. It's like, okay, I want to hit this, then this, then this, then this. And maybe under 2 out of the 5 topics, I will have a question that I think sets it up. Or if I have a question in my head that I know is good, I want to make sure I ask at some point, I'll write that question. But it's never like a list of 40 questions that I want to hit because I more so just want them to talk about specific things. And I need to be able to listen to what they say because to me, the bulk of questions, and this will come in our next section, the bulk of questions is actually going to be follow-ups. And you can't plan for follow-ups because your follow-up comes from their answer. So I want to be tied to the conversation and not to my questions. Last, but certainly not least, follow-ups. I would describe the art of the follow-up as literally listening. That's all following up is listening. And I think sometimes when you are a journalist or an interviewer, you think that your job is talking, but your job actually is listening. Because if you don't listen, you are going to miss the gems of a conversation. You're gonna miss the meat because when somebody says something to you, you always have to ask why, or what did you mean, or can you give me an example, or tell me a time where that happened. And that to me is where you get into these storytelling moments with your interviewee, and those stories are always the best parts of interviews. Questions to me are in levels. So it's like level 1 is that initial question you ask, then level 2 would be the follow-up, like to the answer that they gave you, and level 3 is what is the new thing from what you just discussed with me. So there's always like a way that you can dive deeper and deeper based on what they say, but the only way to do that is for you to stop talking and listen to what they say.
And very last question. You've been interviewed for the last, I don't know, 30 or 45 minutes by us. Rank us, rate us. What did we miss?
No, I actually was in my head thinking that these were really great questions because some of them I've never been asked before. I also think maybe without you realizing there were follow-ups in there based on things that I said. So I know that you all were listening to everything that I said. So I think the interview, 10 out of 10, I felt comfortable. I was into it, so very good. I appreciate this whole role reversal situation. And that is my interview process. Be sure to check out The League, which goes deep on the unlikely and amazing stories from the world of pro football. Only from Audible.